Want to make your brand great again? Or simply make your brand? Go check out our sponsor, SpotlightDesign.com now. That's SpotlightDesign.com now.
Welcome to the CHYE in partnership with COL Live K-Factor podcast with your host, Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy, director of CHYE. Each week we bring you interviews with amazing Jewish entrepreneurs sharing their challenges and successes. Their stories will inspire you to make the Keli and take your business aspirations to the next level. Welcome back to the CHYE K-Factor podcast with your host, Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy. This week I'm very excited, going to be interviewing all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada, Avraham Metal. He's a real estate professional with TR Realty, and he's a true entrepreneur with a tremendous amount of wisdom to share. Avrami, welcome to the K-Factor podcast.
Shua, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on here.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
And have this conversation with you guys.
Yes, it's very exciting. And, I know you have a fascinating story, and so I want to dig right in. And let's, in classic K-Factor style, let's go all the way back. That very first moment when you completed yeshiva and you decided to jump into the business world, what was your very first job?
So, I wish it was, super attractive, and I can lie and say, hey, I had this big idea of going right into real estate and so on and so forth. That's not the case. At first, like many, you're figuring it out. You're trying to find your way. You're not sure what you want to do. So at first, I actually worked for yeshiva, helped out for 1 year. I was 18 at the time. I left a little earlier than we anticipate. But then I left that. I was in Baltimore helping out at yeshiva. Then I left that, went back to New York. I was actually a courier driver. I did that for about 6 to 8 months. Basically, just there was nothing to it, just driving, delivering, and so on. Then I went ahead and got my GED. I had a thought about going to college, so I said I'll go get my GED and go to college. Quickly realized I did not want to go to college. I went and got the GED, and then I decided to just go into sales. So, I had a few little stints with different companies. Then I ended up getting married pretty young, still at 21 years old. And I went into business development and sales for a home health agency in New York.
Let me ask you, and since you're touching on sales for a second, what was your experience in the sales industry? I know there's a lot of guys that take sales positions. What would you share about the sales industry with people?
It's extremely tough. However, it can be extremely rewarding if you're good at it and if you take the time to get good at it. Many people, they think sales is, just super easy, get out there and start selling. It doesn't work like that. Obviously there's, 1,000 people out there trying to beat you every single day at your craft, your competitors. Therefore, you have to become good at it. You have to practice. You have to study. You have to study the art of selling, read books on selling. But in the event that you do become good at it and you do start closing many deals, it can be extremely rewarding in terms of how much money you can make. Some of the biggest wealth, starts out through sales. Commission-based jobs will always make more money than a salary job.
Do you find that there's a particular talent set that a person has to have to succeed in sales?
Yeah, courage and brains. So I'll give you an example. Story just happened last week with me. I was at a property showing to a client, and all of a sudden a gentleman with his wife drives up as we're walking in and says, "What are the chances of me getting into this house to see it?" Now, I've got a split second to decide, what do I do? Do I say, "Hey, I'm with a client," and just ignore this individual? Or talk to them, potentially, rub my client the wrong way, but you never know what's going to happen, right? So I look over to my client, and I said, "Do you mind?" And he says, "No." So I start talking to this gentleman, and we had a long conversation, and showed him the house, let him come through with us. I followed up with him later that day, and by taking that time and that, I'm going to use the term courage, because most agents simply will let that situation pass because they're going to say, "Hey, I'm with a client right now," and just totally ignore that other individual. So by taking that time to talk to this individual, I ended up getting a $500,000 listing out of it. 2 days later, it was on the market,
Wow,
and
that's
we're
great.
out looking for another $500,000 property to purchase. So out of it is, we're going to get $1 million in real estate transactions. And it's simply because I didn't let an opportunity pass that came by me. Too often, we're always trying to figure out where the next fancy, deal is going to come from. And many times it's literally right in front of us. We just don't take the time, the patience, and the energy or the courage to just open up our mouths and say, "Hey, I want this opportunity, and I'm willing to open up my mouth and ask for it." You don't get 100% of what you don't ask for. So I think that courage, a little bit of chutzpah doesn't hurt. And quite frankly, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than for permission, because
Nice,
most people
very
will forgive
nice.
you.
Very nice. So walk us through. You did some sales, but then I understand that at a certain point you transitioned into retail. How did that happen?
So when I left New York, my father-in-law had a retail business in Las Vegas. At that time, he had one store. It was a dollar slash closeout store, 6,500 square feet. And he was about to launch a second store and open a newer, bigger one, which is going to be 23,000 square feet. So all in all, he was going to be roughly around 23,000 square feet of retail space. And the timing worked out that, I was ready to get out of New York and he needed assistance. So I said, I'll come out, give it a shot for a year and assist you. So, I got married January 2012, and October I moved out to Las Vegas. And, we got started in retail bottom up. I didn't come in saying, "Hey, I'm a manager, I'm this, I'm the owner's son-in-law." I didn't do any of that. I started off literally with stocking shelves, because in order to be a manager, you got to understand every position. You got to understand how to manage those positions, but you can only manage those positions if you understand what the position entails.
It's
So I
nothing like
literally stocked
climbing the
shelves.
ranks, you know?
Correct.
Nothing like
So I literally started by stocking shelves, being the cashier, learning the ordering process, learning the selling process, learning the opening and closing process, literally every single aspect of the business before I decided to accept that, role of official manager, which I did successfully for about a year, and realized quickly that retail was just not for me. I didn't enjoy it.
what was that?
And
Explain
I there
what was it about retail that you didn't enjoy?
For my personal preference, I didn't like um, the fact that you have to rely on too many people in order to achieve one goal versus, in real estate, it's yourself, an assistant, or, in many other industries. So I just simply didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the theft, coming in and people just literally stealing from right under you. Theft has been a little, high here in retail. So just all in all, I really did not enjoy retail and didn't see myself being in it for long term. And I always had a principle in life, which is, if there's no end game, why play the game? So I knew quickly there was no end game in retail. So I quickly started looking for, other opportunities. And that's why I left.
I got it. So at that point you segued into medical supplies. Is that if I recall
So
correctly? Is that
actually, yes and no. So straight from retail, I went ahead and finally got my real estate license. And just after I got licensed, I got a call from a medical supply company on the East Coast, which I knew. and basically the call was, hey, we want to open up a location an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes away from you. Are you willing to run it for us and start it and launch it and so on? So I hadn't been, really deep into real estate yet. So it's kind of an opportunity to support my family without having to sweat and stress, the launch of a real estate career, which is really difficult. So I went for that opportunity. And so at first, for about a year and a half, I was driving to and from Las Vegas, to and from Bullhead City and Las Vegas. Bullhead City's in Arizona daily in order to launch this business, get it off the ground, and move on. And that's what I did just after I got my real estate license. I didn't go all in real estate. I kind of went for that salaried plus commission job, which was easier on my family.
I got it. So at some point though, you started to have certain challenges that came up. Tell us a little bit about that and how you dealt with it.
Well, which what happened was, I you know all I realized again that this is not where I wanted to be, and I had some success in that business. We went from zero to almost $500,000 in business in the first year, which is pretty good considering the geographic area and how much I have to work with. And at that time, one of the owners was my brother of the medical supply company, and they were in the process of getting they were selling, so they were getting bought out. So I already knew I wanted to go all in real estate, finally. And they finally, so I basically knew that the business was coming to an end because they were selling, and the other bit company was based out of the East Coast. And I knew that they were going to shut the operations on the West Coast. However, I was still getting a salary and some commissions coming through. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna be the smart guy, and I have it all strategically planned. I am going to, you know, wean my way off of the medical supply business and go all in on real estate on my terms. And I quickly learned the hard way that obviously we're not in control. And I got a call one day saying, we're closing the West Coast operations, and effective today, you're no longer employed with the company. No 2-week notice, no 1 month notice, no nothing. So I had a big decision to make that day, the next day, the day after, which was, what do I do? Do I go all in on real estate with zero income coming from any other avenues? Or do I go out and get another job, which people in the industry were trying to hire me at that moment, and keep on pushing off what I wanted to do, which was the real estate business. And I had what was that?
That's a tremendous decision that a person has to make. That's like standing at the edge. You really have two very very hard choice to make. How were you able to make that that choice? What was it that gave you the intuition at that moment to to take that next big step?
So I wish I can say that it was easy. I wish I could say that I had something that really guaranteed me that I would be successful. I did not. It was a simple conversation I had with my wife, which was, if I don't believe in myself enough to go all in, why should anybody ever believe in me to go all in on me? In other words, all too often, we as entrepreneurs, we as individuals, we want everybody to give us a 30-day money back guarantee, but we never give ourselves a 30-day money back guarantee. In other words, we don't sell ourselves on ourselves. We always want to sell ourselves to others. Hey, I want you to hire me because, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, et cetera, and I want you to give me $100,000 salary. managing a warehouse or doing sales or being an office manager or whatever it may be. And we never have that conversation in the mirror with ourselves and say, hey, you know, I want you to guarantee me that you're going to go all in and you're going to give it your all. And I had to have that, tough conversation with myself, which was, hey, if I don't go all in on myself, what's going to happen? No one's ever going to go all in on me. And why should they? So it was basically a conversation that I had with my wife and said, listen, let's give it 6 months, see what happens. And, either in 6 months, I'll be off the ground, or in 6 months, we'll be dead broke. It was literally that cold and that brutal and that honest. And thankfully, it worked out slowly, and you just got to work hard. So that was the big decision I had to make. And I'm glad I did what I did, which was go all in. And, I always say my biggest regret is I didn't go all in sooner.
Mm. So you wind up in real estate. You seem to have always been attracted to real estate. What was it about real estate that was so attractive to you that you jumped all in with real estate?
There was no specific plan of action I had when I was going to get into the real estate business. I have a cousin. He recently passed a couple years ago, but a gentleman named Leon Charney, who made it to Forbes, billionaire list through owning skyscrapers in New York, Times Square. And as a kid watching that happen, and growing up in Crown Heights in a situation where we didn't have a lot of finances in our home, it's always like that. Bigger cousin or bigger uncle or whomever that everyone has in their family that, has quote unquote made it in life. And you use that as a, anchoring point of where you want to get, or where you think you can get in that industry. And therefore I always saw, real estate as an opportunity to, make money. As well as it was something that always interests me. It was an interesting concept to me, and interesting enough to me that I would be willing to, test it out.
Very nice. So you segue into real estate, and you go all the way in, and I see there was no looking back.
No, not at all.
So
and
what is it about real estate that keeps you going?
Part of it is the uncertainty. A lot of people do not enjoy the uncertainty. When we wake up as commission, earners, commission sales people, we don't know where our next meal is going to come from. We don't know where that salary is going to come from. We don't know how we're going to pay our mortgage or rent or car or food or tuition or anything like that. And for me, I actually thrive and do well under pressure. If I'm too calm, I actually don't do as well. I'm not as courageous when I'm calm. I'm more courageous when, I'm under pressure. Hey, I need to accomplish X, Y, and Z by the end of the month, or I need to do this by the end of the month. I'll do things that I wouldn't normally do, because naturally, who wants to put themselves out there? Nobody. We all don't want to, put ourselves online, write articles and, give speeches and so on and so forth. Naturally, we just want to be in our own little bubble, hide under our bed, and hope and wish and pray that money just shows up on our in our bank account, and we can go out and buy a house and buy whatever we want. It doesn't work like that, and I quickly realized that I would have to, get out there, work extremely hard, put in the hours, and quite frankly, it doesn't get easier; it only gets harder. And the goal changes, but you got to keep on working and keep on going.
So let me ask you like this: there's a tremendous amount of our young people that go into real estate. I would say it's one of the top professions that people go into in our community. So if you were talking to a young guy that was getting into real estate as a broker, what wisdom would you share with them one or two thoughts.
So, it's a great question, and I would say that that's probably the biggest issue in the industry is that that question. People don't have the right answer to that question, and statistically, I know out here in Nevada, every 2 years is your renewal for your license, and statistically, 80% of new agents do not make it to the first renewal period. So 80% of agents will literally be out of business within 2 years. And the only way they even track that is because they're not renewing their license. So, I'm sure that the numbers are even more within a year. So, I had a conversation, a while back, over a year ago, probably, with one of my mentors, Joe Applebaum. And, the biggest issue not only real estate agents have, but any entrepreneur has, but in this case, you're asking specifically about real estate, is clarity. People do not have a clarity on about who they want to work with and what they want to do. So, I'll give you an example. When, if you go hunting and you want to go hunt for bird, you're going to bring the proper rifle with the proper, bird shot ammunition, et cetera, and you're going to be looking up in the air looking for bird. However, you're not going to just come out and just start shooting away up in the air and hoping and praying that, you hit one. And what we find is that entrepreneurs, specifically real estate agents in this case, they come out and just shoot up in the air and hope that something happens. They don't know what they want. They don't know what specialty they want to go into. And they end up just shooting away, trying to hit. It's like throwing spaghetti on a wall and seeing what sticks. So in my case, in the beginning, the first year, it wasn't easy because I didn't have clarity. I didn't know who I want. I mean, it's still not easy, but I didn't have clarity. So I didn't know if I wanted to work with sellers. I didn't know if I wanted to work with buyers. I didn't know if I wanted to do commercial, residential, rentals, etc. What happened? I would take whatever came my way instead of seeking out what I wanted. Then I realized, hey, I'm going to go into just sales and acquisitions of residential real estate. And by default, I ended up getting into house flipping. So I've become a specialist in locating properties that are flippable or off-market properties that are flippable, as well as sales and acquisitions of residential. So, part of it is saying, hey, that's not my specialty. And all too often we think that, it's embarrassing to say that I don't do X, Y, and Z because, we're afraid of how we look. And, for me, I have a client that just recently asked me to buy him a shopping center. I said, I'd love to help you out, but that's not my specialty. I'm licensed to do it. I can do it, but it's not my specialty. I don't have the, specific knowledge for shopping centers like I have for residential.
So what would you
And
say if you're describing here that whole journey that you went through? So if someone's new and getting into it, what would they have to, what best practices could they put in place, to mitigate that as much as possible?
good question. So I think, number one is have mentorship. Get people to guide you and help you that are today where you want to be tomorrow. Because you can cut out the time. So if someone's, doing $1 million in gross commission and that's where you want to get that guy who's doing 10 times what you are doing today. Because someone who's doing 10 times of what you're doing today can assist you to get to where he is. And then when you get to that 1 million, you can say, hey, who do I go to next? Who's doing 10 million? And you find that next guy who's doing 10 million who can help you to 10 times and 10x your business from there. So mentorship is huge for me. It played a big part of and continues to play a big part in what I do daily. I have mentors in every aspect of my life. And I think that is the, probably the best, the number one thing to do. Number two is reading books. When you are going into sales, read every sales book that's out there. So whether it be a cold calling book, Mastering the Art of Selling, in my case, Real Estate by John Hopkins, or, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, or the 7 Levels of Communication. All these books that are specifically on real estate that I purchase and read, as well as other self development books and business books. So books are like the closest thing to that magic secret pill that people are always trying to figure out. Because when someone takes 20, 30 years of their journey and their life and puts it into a 200-page book, think of all that value that you're getting by reading it for 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, however long it takes you to read. So I think that reading and mentorship are the two best ways to cut the travel time, so to speak, to your destination.
Okay, so Avraham, you've really been sharing with us your journey. It's been a fascinating one. You really had to make your way through all sorts of different experiences to get to where you were. But in these last few minutes here of the podcast, let me ask you some rapid fire questions. So first of all, tell us a big challenge you went through and how you navigated that big challenge.
I mean, the big challenge I've gone through is the same challenge I go through every single day, like everybody. We're all humans. Is continuing growth in your business. So constantly getting more clients and maintaining that amount of business that you want to get to and that you're doing. That's the biggest challenge. Sales cures all.
So, Avrami, I know that a mentor played a big role in your life. Tell us a little bit about that and the importance of that.
I know we touched on it a few minutes ago, but mentorship is someone who is doing 10x of what you're doing today, and the best way to achieve that 10x is by going to someone who's already done it, understands the challenges you're going to face, because he's overcome those challenges. So when you can bounce that idea off of that individual and you can say, hey, I went through this and this is how I, navigated the situation, that to me is golden.
So who did you have a mentor in your life?
I have multiple. I would say my main mentor is Joe Applebaum, who is a favorite here on the podcast.
Yes, indeed. So I know that at a certain point in time, under the influence of Yossi, you decided that you're going to make some big changes in your life. And those changes, they really help push you forward as a person and in your business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've had a few specific. One was weight loss, which I'm pretty excited about. I had a goal to hit, 180 pounds by December 31st. And as of today, I hit that target. So I'm a bit early on the target. So all in all, 47 pounds down, which is awesome. And part of it was simple. It was literally a simple conversation with Joe. We were talking about, our goals for 2017. And, I mentioned I wanted to get down to a certain weight loss. And he's like, hey, are you serious about this? I said, yeah. So he's like, great. Now, why don't you commit to no carbs, no sugar, and no alcohol for 90 days? So what am I going to say? No. So I agreed. And, 90 days became 120 days. Then it became 150 days. Then it became 180 days. Then 210, 240, 250, etc. So, and that really enabled me to hit my target over there, as well as in business. My goal was to hit certain numbers and achieve certain goals. And by having that mentorship, which, also was accountability for me, I had an accountability partner who knew what I wanted to do because I told him what I wanted to do. That kept me accountable. So throughout the month, when I'm looking at my numbers and my notes and I'm saying, hey, I'm not hitting where I want to be, I know that I'm going to have that phone conversation on such and such day in 3 weeks. I don't want to say I didn't hit my goal. I don't want to say I didn't do what I said I was going to do. So, when you have that accountability by someone else, that is, powerful.
I know that in addition the diet changes. I know you changed the whole way that you schedule your day, and that had a tremendous impact on you. Share with us a little bit about those changes and the impact it had on you.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest impact and from the biggest change that I did was, the time I go to sleep and the time I wake up. I was that guy, and I probably still am that guy by nature, that, I'm a night owl. I would work till 2, 3 in the morning and think that I was super efficient, and getting so much done. And what I realized is I was actually not only not being efficient because you're half asleep at 2 in the morning, but it was killing my next morning and my next day. And, you kill Sunday, it ends up killing Monday, and it's a domino effect. So, I obviously started going to bed earlier than I used to. And, I started waking up between 4 and 5 every day. So, now I'm getting, more done in the morning before my wife wakes up, before my kids wake up, before davening, before anything. I get in some exercise, and I get in some work, follow up, emails, etc. At 4 or 5 in the morning. So that has been a huge, huge boost to my everyday life.
It's a very, very courageous thing to do, and I've heard from many people that shifting their day around and getting up extra early really transforms their productivity, and really makes a tremendous difference in their life. Two final questions for you: work
Go for it.
life, Torah study balance. How do as a busy business person, how do you juggle all of those things, and maintain your your business and your family life and your Yiddish life? What's your secret to keeping all of that in harmonious synchrony?
It's a good question, and I know I ask it a lot, and I know many people ask that question. It's probably, the work-life balance question is probably the number one question that, business people and entrepreneurs ask. And I think it really boils down to priorities. So, what's your priority? So, for example, if this month my priority is to grow my business, and I know I need to do X, Y, and Z to do that, and I need to make 100 calls a day to speak to 20 people, to get 10 appointments, to close on 3. I know that that's going to take a lot more of my day in terms of time than in a month that we're already pushing forward, and we're really killing it in terms of leads and clients and so on and so forth. So I think priorities. And then if my month is, hey, I want to focus on working a little less and spending more time with the family, then my priority is spending time with the family. So that means that when I fill up my calendar, I'm going to say that from this time to this time, my calendar is already booked. And that's for, bedtime and dinner with the family, and wake up with the kids in the morning and get them ready and take them to school and so on and so forth. So I think ultimately it boils down to priorities and time management. So, we hear a lot of, hey, I don't have enough time. And I think that, take Bill Gates, take, Avraham Metal, take Shua Wordy, we all have 24 hours in a day. So it's just a matter of how we prioritize. It's not that Bill Gates has 48 hours in a day, and that's why he can make, the amount of billions he does. No, he just knows how to leverage time and be extremely efficient in those 24 hours.
Very nice. Yes, no question about it. Definitely we have to lock in our priorities, and we have to focus on them and stay razor sharp. And that's really the only way to keep those things in place. So, as a Yid in business, is there a particular moment that you're proud of that was through your business you made a Kiddush Hashem, or something, that stands out as that, being a Jew in business you're proud of?
Constantly I probably deal with, I would say, kosher and chalav Yisrael are probably the number one biggest things I deal with on a daily basis. So, hey, Avram, we are serving lunch. We'd love for you to be there with us, and so on and so forth. And I always have to say, hey, I keep kosher, so I can't attend, or or I go there and I just drink a glass of water, and then they ask me why I'm not eating, and then I explain kosher, and then they find something that has an OUD on it, and I have to then explain Cholav Yisrael. So that always gets kind of, tricky, and that's probably my biggest thing I
Do you
deal with
find
on a
that
daily
people
basis.
do you find that people respect you when you tell them these things?
Absolutely. Um, I would tell you, and then also Shabbos. And I will tell you that non-Jews respect Jews who respect Judaism. Just last week, obviously, Shabbos is getting earlier, and I was, 20, 30 minutes after Shabbos, I was back on my phone with a client, and his text to me was, Avram, why are you working on the Sabbath this week? So,
He
they
thought he
hold me
that you, huh?
accountable. Yeah, so they hold me accountable, because when you put it out there and say, this is what I do, that's a big responsibility. So I deal with that daily. And, there's been a couple times that, I had negotiations going up literally up to the 18 minutes in Shabbos, where we were about to either buy or sell a property for a client. And I had to send that text message, or it was on a phone call, and say, hey, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I keep the Sabbath. Sabbath starts today at sundown, and, ends tomorrow at such and such time. And I would tell you that 2 out of the 3 times that I vividly remember having to say it, the other individual on the other side says, oh, I'm actually Jewish too. It's nice that someone actually keeps what they say they keep.
Very nice.
So on
That's
and so
beautiful.
forth. So, I think that people do respect it. Occasionally you're going to run into the person that either doesn't understand it or chooses not to understand it. But in the Las Vegas real estate market, it is definitely extremely rare to have someone say, I don't work on Saturday, because most of the business goes down on Saturday. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges for a frum, Shabbos observant real estate agent here in Las Vegas. But, we all believe in God, and God does his part as long as we do our part. And therefore, we don't get caught up into, Shabbos versus Sunday versus Friday versus Tuesday. We go all in, do our part, and the rest will follow.
That's fantastic. And I have to say that this has been a wonderful conversation filled with so much wisdom. So much wisdom. So if somebody listening to this podcast wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
They can get in touch with me through Facebook, email, my website, my cell phone, either or. I'm pretty available and pretty out there. If someone wants to get a hold of me, I try to respond to every text message, every email, every WhatsApp message, every Facebook message, every Instagram message. I try to respond to everything. So you can really search Avraham Metal, Avraham Metal, Metal, anywhere, and you should be able to pull up my profile and get in touch with me.
So, Avrami, let me wish you continued Hatzlacha. And for all of you listening, this has been another wonderful interview at the CHYE K Factor podcast. Stay tuned for next week's. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for listening to the CHYE in partnership with COL Live K Factor podcast with your host, Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy. We're looking forward to bringing you more entrepreneurs to share their amazing stories. See you next week.